Do you need to break your bad security habits during Stay Smart Online Week?
And can Samsung survive the Note7 apocalypse?
Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.
Welcome to Vertical Hold, the tech show where we channel surf through the headlines in search of the big picture. I'm Alex Kidman, and I'm joined by a man who is stockpiling Note7 handsets for winter fuel, Adam Turner. We're also joined by picker.com.au editor and freelance tech journalist Lee Stark. Lee, welcome back to the show.
Thanks, guys. It's always good to be here.
Adam, what's new in tech?
Sony's PlayStation VR headset is finally on sale in Australia, selling for $550, but it also requires a PlayStation 4 along with the $90 optional PlayStation 4 camera. Of course, a virtual reality platform is only as good as its content, and Sony's promising to have at least 50 VR compatible games on the shelves by Christmas.
This year's Melbourne Cup will be a little different in streaming terms, with Twitter announcing that it signed a deal with the Victoria Racing Club to stream the race live as it happens via Twitter. Anyone want to take bets on how well the live stream will hold up?
Augmented reality is also getting a shot in the arm, with Microsoft finally accepting pre-orders for its HoloLens headset in Australia, which is due to ship in November. At these prices, it's clearly aimed more at developers than consumers. Expect to pay nearly $4,500 for the developer edition, or more than $7,000 for the commercial suite.
Vodafone has kicked off 5G trials in association with Nokia and the University of Technology Sydney, showing off peak speeds of near 5 gigabits per second with sub 1 millisecond latency. That's a potent combination right now, but the standards are still in flux, so 5G when it actually lands could be even faster.
So Alex, Twitter's getting all aflutter about the Melbourne Cup. Do we think this will actually work?
Well, you know, stereotypically you talk about it being the race that stops the nation. I've got to wonder if it's the race that will stop Twitter. Or we might see a re-emergence of the famous fail whale.
Yes.
Because the key thing with this, I think, is that live aspect to it. Although they're not the first ones to stream the race. Channel 7 kicked off its streaming TV stuff last year with the Melbourne Cup.
True.
And there were complaints back then of people not able to access it or it being a bit slow or off the mark compared to other sources. I'm not a big racing personality, and obviously only one of us here is from Melbourne, where I understand it's practically a religious experience.
Pretty much.
But I totally get the idea that for a 3-minute horse race, you want to make sure that you get those 3 minutes absolutely dead on right.
What do you reckon, Lee? Do you reckon they can do it?
I was going to say, the moment Alex started talking about the last year's Melbourne Cup, I was thinking, I was pretty sure that was streamed as well. And yeah, you're right, it did really well, and then it didn't do really well. So it was kind of like hit and miss. I think they can nail it, but again, they're going to have some really good people who aren't deciding to get drunk during the race, which, as I understand it, you're the Melbourne, that's kind of, again, part of the tradition.
That is very much part of the tradition. But the interesting thing here is that, and Seven might have done the same last year, but Twitter's not just talking about broadcasting the race, which lasts for 3 or 4 minutes. They're actually putting together a 1-hour program. So I'm not sure if that's what people want from Twitter. If I want to sit down and watch the hours lead up to the Melbourne Cup on Twitter, I would have thought it was just for that. I'm away from a television, I'm maybe even away from a radio, I'm just going to dip in. Is this what we want from Twitter?
Well, I think the thing there is that the actual TV production is still being handled by Channel 7.
Yeah.
They've still got the rights, and it's not entirely clear at this point whether or not they will also be doing their own internet stream of it. Although one of the more interesting aspects for the Twitter deal is that there's no geo-block on it. So if you're an Aussie expat somewhere else on the planet and you can be bothered to get up in what might be the middle of the night, you can watch the Melbourne Cup on Twitter. They won't stop you doing it. But basically what they're running is the 7 feed. And again, horse racing, totally not my thing.
Yeah.
But they run days of this stuff. And certainly leading up to the race, it's pretty much just all horse racing all the time.
Yeah.
So they're pretty much just tapping into that feed. And I guess it's not a bad thing if you're in an office and you don't have a TV and you do have someone signed into Twitter. You can just kind of have it running in the background. I've certainly worked in plenty of offices, and this is going back a few years, where you'd throw a radio on probably 10, 15 minutes before. I don't know that people will watch the whole hour that way, though.
See, Twitter's also doing... No, go, Lee.
Sorry. I was just saying, and you make the point, Adam, that Twitter doing this sort of thing, producing a program, and Twitter started getting into the whole TV is the new medium, TV is the internet sort of thing. I think it was last year they had the Amplify thing, which is like teenage TV. So it almost feels like Twitter producing its own program or producing or working with Channel 7 makes a lot of sense for its audience. I don't know whether it necessarily connects with hashtags or if it even responds to people. Given the time frame of the Melbourne Cup, it doesn't seem like it would all be enough time really to type in 140 characters of anything. But it does seem like the sort of area Twitter wants to say it's TV now, even though it's just technically an internet service.
I thought the whole point though is we were getting beyond its TV. In the US, they're streaming 10 NFL games. NFL games. But thinking of the equivalent, I'm not sure if people in Australia would want to watch an entire AFL game via Twitter, where there'll be other ways to watch it. I'll be very surprised if 7 doesn't have it on their own service. They've obviously done a deal with Twitter, but I couldn't see Twitter locking up the rights in such a way that 7 couldn't use it also.
You have to wonder.
I would imagine Sorry, you go ahead, Lee.
So I was going to say, and I'm not sure if this is something you guys agree with, but you'd have to wonder whether Twitter believes itself, like in many ways like Facebook, to be something that redefines what TV is. Is TV just broadcasting of anything, or is it really sitting in front of a television?
Yeah, it's funny, I was literally just about to say that you can bet that if Twitter didn't do it, Facebook would do it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of it. It's that building the value of their social brand. So even if they aren't getting, TV-style viewing figures, they can say, well, we've got this other thing to draw people in, which then draws the advertisers in. And Twitter is still burning large sums of money. There's still rumours flying around about people wanting to buy Twitter, whether or not a technology company would do it or a Wall Street firm would do it, whether or not the CEO will stay or go. So all of this stuff is in flux while they're doing it. In some ways, they're having as much of a bet on Twitter as people might actually have on the Cup. Although, in terms of exclusivity, I would have thought, again, sports, totally not my thing, but I would have thought that it'd be one of those protected style events where almost nobody could lock it up behind a paywall anyway.
Oh, you could lock it up behind a paywall online because people always have the option to watch it on free-to-air broadcast television. I don't think the anti-siphoning laws would extend to what you can and can't do with it online. Just to me, it seems that when a service like Twitter wants to stream something like live sport, that is it going through a bit of an identity crisis? Does it actually know who it is? And as you say, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe they strengthen the brand. Maybe they reach more people. Maybe they dilute the brand. Maybe they sort of forget who they are. We interested to know how many people actually thought that Twitter was the place that they wanted to watch sport.
So Adam, it's Stay Smart Online Week. Does this mean that for like 51 weeks a year we can be dumb online and it's just this week we've got to fuss about being smart?
Well, I don't know. It depends how much time you spend on Twitter. That sounds like a fair ratio to me when you look at some people. But yeah, it's pretty much, it's just a government initiative. It's aimed not just at consumers, but also at businesses and particularly small businesses. It's saying, use a bit of common sense online. When that email comes through saying, hey, here's an invoice you got to pay, stop and ask yourself, is that really it? If your password is password, maybe that's not such a good password. So it's just to get people thinking about this kind of stuff.
Password is not a good password. Password is never a good password. Let's just make
What
that
about password?
really, really clear.
Password 1? Password 2?
Password with an exclamation mark is a marginally better password than password without an exclamation mark.
Ah, all right.
I'm beginning to understand why it's so easy to break into your luggage, Adam.
Yes. So what do you guys do to stay safe online? Are there any particular things that you find are useful?
Digital condom? No.
Yes, some of my spam goes a bit that way as well. Yes.
It's a silly term in a way, but it's not necessarily a terrible concept. I'm a big fan myself of password management software. So I have one really good, memorable only to me, lockdown password for that, and then a fully encrypted vault of hideously complicated other passwords. And I know there's lots of argument about whether or not multi-character stuff is better than words separated by commas or hyphens or what have you, but certainly length is a fair factor in making your password secure. The combination of that and where it's available, two-factor authentication, which we've talked about previously, is good basic stuff, but it's good basic stuff that so many people don't seem to pick up on.
What about you, Lee?
I totally agree with him. And the thing is about, like, personally, I'm a big believer. I know most people that work in our field are a big believer in internet security as a whole. But given the spate of ransomware as a whole, that's an area that just frustrates me endlessly. The very fact that people can get, I want to say screwed is the right word, because they have no idea quite what they're clicking on. For some reason, people still click on things like executables and zip files and open them up, and the education for some reason is not there. But I want to say at this point that if you're not using password security, good password security, you're probably not using internet security at all, and you should be educated on both of those. So for me, the password manager is definitely a must-have, but the internet security should be a part of everyone's arsenal. I used to have this idea that, in a way, internet security was much like toilet paper. You know you need it. Everyone needs it. Doesn't matter what operating system you're on, you basically need it. So just go and buy it. It's like toilet paper. You know you need it. You're not going to
put it on the shopping list.
It's all you need for a computer is toilet paper. Sorry, not toilet paper. Is the internet security. After that, you can do whatever you want. But it's a must-have thing. It has to be on your list every year.
What you're saying about people clicking on executables, I have a bit more sympathy for when it happens to businesses, because they don't get caught so much with, hey, look at these racy pictures online. It's more like, oh, here's an invoice that you've forgotten to pay, or here's a purchase order, or thanks for, you missed that FedEx delivery, please come and pick it up. And I will admit that it's only in the last 12 months I've probably started getting a lot of that, particularly here's a purchase order and an invoice. And as a small business owner, I get those kind of emails. And I will admit that I looked twice at the first few. I never got as far as, seriously thinking about clicking on it, but I went, oh, is that real? No, I don't think it is. Which is, I usually, like, spam doesn't even get that far. It's just like spam, gone. So I can understand if you're a person who's in a role where you're getting those kind of things all day, it's not necessarily your job to be in charge of things like security. It's just your job to handle the purchase orders and the invoices, and an email comes in that looks legit. I can totally understand why people get burned on that. And that's why a big part of this, I think, is education. If I ran a small business with a dozen employees, I'd be sitting them all down and saying, these are the tricks, this is how it works, this is how you get done, this is what you've got to watch out for. Because what the reason why these scams work is not so much they rely on technical flaws, they rely on just catching somebody who's not concentrating for 5 minutes and doesn't realize what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, this is the problem where
the human flaw is the biggest part of
this is the problem where the common sense thing kind of falls away, because they're actually psychological ploys. And I think we've moved, well beyond, and in fact years but beyond, where the promise of a naked picture of Anna Kournikova could spread viruses, and back in the day it did. I think that stuff.
I'm sure it still gets some people, but
I'm sure it still gets some, but I suspect as a general vector, it's not quite as effective. And also, though, of course, the actual aims of a lot of the malware have moved on from just being destructive stuff to being stuff that wants to siphon into your personal information, wants to siphon into your bank account, or wants to take control of your computer either for ransomware or botnet purposes. So this stuff's more sophisticated, but the base psychological stuff, the stuff that either appeals to essentially your lust, so whether that's lust for the naked ladies or lust for money, and that includes kind of invoices, or panic, simple panic. You must pay this fine, or fear. We are the ATO and we has determined
we're going to cut your
that
power
you
off.
Has not paid your taxes in many years, spelt with a double E. All that kind
bastards.
of stuff. Yeah. All that kind of stuff works really well because people panic.
But just as a point to your thing, Adam, and I totally agree with you. In a business environment, it is a flawed situation. But in a business environment, even if the education's not there, I kind of expect more than anyone else the business to have internet security to at least give them that layer of protection in case somebody without the education does click on the file that they shouldn't.
Yeah.
It's effective
I
business
think if
insurance.
I was a business, one of the things I would do, I would be putting in processes that say very clearly it is Bob's job to deal with all the invoices and stuff. If you get an email like that, you don't click it, you don't open it. At worst, you forward it to him. Bob is the one who handles this stuff, and Bob is the one who has the serious training on how to spot this stuff. If every employee in the organization thinks that it's okay for them to check invoices and purchase orders and stuff like that, that's leaving your cell phone open. So it's all about internal workflow to make sure it gets funneled to the person who is actually on the ball and watching out for this stuff. All right, Alex, the Note 7 apocalypse is here. Can Samsung survive this? Who will benefit? What will happen next?
Well, I mean, in short order, yeah, the Note 7 apocalypse is here, and unfortunately that means that the Note 7 itself is dead, and in this case, it's being cremated. But
as dead as that squirrel.
Yeah, exactly right. In the very immediate term, Samsung's already admitted, yeah, look, we're going to take a bit of a bath on this financially. They're looking at seriously revising their profit forecasts, and you've got to remember that Samsung is a massive company, absolutely enormous, with its, and especially somewhere like its home base of South Korea, it has its fingers in many pies. It's not just a maker of smartphones and washing machines that may catch fire. It also makes everything up to and including military equipment. So I kind of don't want to tick those guys off. They know how to make missiles. But that being said, the more interesting broad question is probably around what it does in that premium Android space, because the Note 7 was its second premium phone for 2016, following on from the S7 and S7 Edge that it launched at Mobile World Congress. They're still around, they're still great phones, and in fact, Samsung itself, as part of its Note 7 exchange program, will offer you an S7 Edge, and as long as they gave you a bit of a refund of the difference, that's maybe not a terrible deal. Actually, if you have a Note 7, if you still have a Note 7, for God's sake, get rid of it. Do not hold on to the thing. But if you do, what I would be pushing for in almost every instance is to get a refund, because the purchase price was pretty high, and you can actually pick up pretty much your choice of smartphone for that kind of money, whereas the option of being given an S7 Edge and maybe the difference between that and Samsung's RRP is not as great. You can get an S7 Edge a bit cheaper than they're selling it themselves. And then it just becomes this question of, because Samsung is so large in the Android space, you've got Samsung and Apple basically carve up the profits between them. Apple takes more than Samsung does. But in the premium space, it's Samsung and then, spacebar, everybody else. There's a huge gap. That gap will shorten. And it's that question, who do we think is going to jump into that gap? Whose phones are going to take over in the interim until we see effectively what will be the Galaxy S8, probably at Mobile World Congress next year?
Does this make a space for the Google's Pixel? I don't remember what the screen sizes are on that phone, or is that too much of a specialist thing to really be a threat here?
No, I actually think it's completely valid. I mean, the Google Pixel is 5 inches and 5.5 inches, depending on what you have. So, given that the Note 7 was, 5.7, 5.9, something like that, I mean, it was technically the same hardware as the S7 Edge, and we didn't get the Qualcomm variant of the Samsung in this country. Ours are Exynos space, so Samsung local hardware. I think it does kind of make that spot for Google, but Google's phones have always, to me, felt a little specialist, almost like they were made outside of the Nexus 4 and 5, which did really well because they were priced accordingly.
Yeah.
They were priced to really be competitive. These are now, as we saw from that launch, they're expensive phones. So I don't know. I think it kind of gives companies that have been struggling a little bit, like the Sony, the Motorola, even HTC to an extent, it gives them a little bit of a leg up to say, hey, our phones don't explode. And again, it's a genuine shame that it happened to the Note 7, because I don't know about you guys, I actually thought it was one of the best phones I'd ever reviewed in my life.
Absolutely. I mean, easily one of the best this year, easy top 3, possibly the best phone this year, apart from that whole pesky exploding in flames thing, which is a bit of a problem, let's admit it. But everyone's got their flaws, I suppose.
It'll be interesting to see if all boats rise, and if it will help those like your Alcatels and your Oppos and that sort of mid-range that are trying to push up in terms of value for money, whether they'll get a bit of a boost out of it as well, or whether, as you say, it's the flagships of the top tier brands that will sort of step in to take that place.
I don't think the Note 7 buyer is as much of a budget or mid-range buyer as that. I mean, it was interesting to note that
they will be looking at alternative flagships.
They'd sold something like just over, I forget the exact figure, but just over 50,000 Note 7s shipped out and were sold in that initial shipment, before they realised there was any kind of problem at all. So there was a reasonably sizable market for a very short span of time. And I think I agree with Lee. The Pixel's kind of it's great if you're an Android mega enthusiast, and if you love everything Google does, it brings all that stuff to play at a reasonably high price. But it really is it's a very geeky phone, and also of course it's a limited access phone in Australia. You can buy it outright from Google if that's what you want to do, or you can get it from Telstra. That's it. The Note 7, of course, was ranged by all the big telcos. So if you're an Optus customer or you're a Voda customer who wants to be on contract, well, you don't have that option. And looking at the Note 7, there aren't a lot of stylus-equipped large screen phones out there. You can get large screen phones, you can get stylus-equipped phones, although there's precious few. The one that immediately springs to mind is the much more mid-range LG stylus DAB Plus phone. But that's not a Note 7 competitor in power terms. It's much cheaper and simpler, and deliberately so. That's where its market sits. So there's not an exact competitor out there for Samsung. And of course, there's also only a matter of maybe 4 to 5 months before they do launch an S8. And as has typically always been the case, the best features of the previous year's Note nearly always end up on the next year's Mobile World Congress Galaxy S phones, so presumably that'll have the iris sensor. I'm guessing it won't have the stylus, but this raises the other question: should Samsung continue with the Note brand, or is it permanently burnt?
I kind of feel like it is permanently burnt. I was thinking about this before, but for what it's worth, it almost makes you wonder how long Samsung is going to continue with Galaxy-branded products as a whole. It makes you wonder if they want to shift.
So for the Note 7 users out there who want a replacement, they do, of course, have choices, but what choice should they make? So, Adam, if you were, dropping a burning Note 7 into a bin and getting a refund on it, what would you spend the cash on?
I'm kind of boring, and I'd say an iPhone, but I know that anyone who's buying a Note 7 wouldn't want an iOS device. So I'd probably even just look at going back to my old Android handset. I'll just pick up something to do the job and wait and see how it plays out. As you said, wait and see what happens with the S8. Wait and see sort of who else fills into that gap, steps into that gap. Because you're spending so much money, I'd be reluctant to sort of jump in if you weren't 100% sure that this is what I wanted. Lee, was there something in particular you reckon would fill that gap?
I'm actually kind of on the same playing field as you, to be honest. Part of the issue is that you're buying the Note 7 because it has such a unique collection of features. The stylus
for sure,
the water resistance. All of these things are super, they're important parts of what make it what it is. The only thing, as strange as it is, that gets close to that without the stylus feels like it's the iPhone 7 Plus. And again, as you said, if you're on Android, you're probably not going to go for the iOS camp. So I would probably wait to the S8, if only because it may actually end up coming with the stylus. They might just recycle and say, yeah, you know what, we burned, no pun intended, here's the stylus with it just for fun.
See, I mean, that's interesting, because if you go for the iPhone, of course, quite potentially speaking, you could in fact end up spending even more money. They're the one set of phones that make the Note 7 look a little bit affordable. If it were me, and I totally, I mean, the new iPhones are quite nice, but if it were me, oddly enough, I would jump back to Samsung. I would go for the S7 Edge, which currently I would strongly argue in terms of features plus affordability. Is probably one of the best phones of the year, if not the best. The iPhones are nice, but they are very, very expensive. And you can pick up an S7 Edge because it's now 6 months old. You can pick one up if you shop kind of savvy for around $700 to $800, which means you get $500 odd.
The price of them might be about to go up though.
Well,
because they might now be in demand by people who had to give back their Note 7.
I think if you've got a Note 7, you should be acting fast anyway. But the point is, you would still end up with some money back in your pocket. And as long as the stylus is the only thing. If you want a stylus, you're in a bit of trouble, actually, I think. But as long as you could live without the stylus aspect of it, the S7 Edge performs much the same. You get the curved screen, you get the waterproofing, you get basically the same expandable memory options. It all works in a very, very similar way. So that would probably be your best similar bet if you were going to jump to a replacement Note 7 phone, in my view.
I can actually agree with that completely. The S7 Edge makes a lot of sense, and you're right, Alex. With the Note 7 now obliterated from the map, the S7 Edge is probably one of the best phones you can find on the market today. That being said, I kind of want to also say the the Huawei P9, if only because it looks kind of like an iPhone. It feels kind of like an iPhone. If it weren't, it's got a very good camera, much like the iPhone. But again, it's missing that stylus, which is one of those features that Samsung just had the edge on. No pun intended.
Well, that just about wraps it up for another episode of Vertical Hold. Remember, if you've got any comments, hit us up in the comments section on YouTube, via Twitter, or the Facebook Vertical Hold page. Thanks to Lee for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks everyone for listening, and remember, if you like what you hear, hit that subscribe button. Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Alcatel.